let's talk a little bit of Brandon Aiyuk, because we brought him up, and I think that Brandon Aiyuk is a name that people have a lot of questions about. And, you're talking about trade partners. You're talking about the Buffalo Bills. You're talking about moving back from 20 to 28. And then everybody brings up like, oh, well, you could trade for Brandon Aiyuk. Like I said, I think the NFL draft is the first spot that Brandon Aiyuk could be moved at. That's the first time that I think the window is like fully open for a move. And no matter what the San Francisco 49ers have to say about it, they'll consider a move. Obviously, Ian Rappaport went on NFL Total Access, I believe, today and said that the 49ers have been getting trade requests and getting calls, but they haven't entertained anything. I've been told a lot of the same stuff, that teams are calling, that the Steelers are calling, that they've called multiple times over the last couple months, and the 49ers continue to say somewhat of the same things. Look, at Brandon Aiyuk and us want to get a trade or get a deal done. If we get a deal done, this shuts everything down. The Steelers aren't convinced that a deal is going to get done. I'm not convinced that a deal is going to get done. I look at the situation as this. Brandon Ayuk's first possibility of being traded comes during the NFL draft. And if a team wants to overpay for him with the first round pick, so be it. Steelers missed out. No big deal. The Steelers aren't going to give up a first round pick for Brandon Aiyuk. They might give up a second round pick for Brandon Aiyuk, and that could happen within that 24-hour window of day one and day two, which, if we know how the Steelers operate, that's when it's going to happen, right when everybody's sleeping, 3 a.m. Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan are the only people awake in the whole world, and they're making deals happen at 4 a.m. I think that that's the first window of opportunity. If it doesn't happen there, don't give up on it. I think that this could happen during training camp. I think once a hold-in becomes imminent, I believe that once they realize, that's when it's going to happen. Once the San Francisco 49ers give up and they say, this isn't going to happen, this is just becoming a hassle, we're about to lose him for nothing next season, and he's not going to play this year, that's when the Steelers are going to pounce. And I think the Steelers are the favorites to land him. I've been told by sources that they would be surprised if it didn't happen, but when it's going to happen, we don't know. Nobody knows. I would say if it doesn't happen during the draft, this conversation is going to go on until August. And then at that point, if a deal doesn't get done, that window is very much so open. I mean, I don't know. Two questions here. Even if Ayuk's not on the table, you still making that trade in the first round? And then if you're looking at Aiyuk past the NFL draft, is his value the same, second round pick in 2025, if August comes around?
To answer the first question, I'm still trading back. I still think that is a good option for the Steelers because, I mean, we talked about it even outside the scope of a guy like Brandon Aiyuk. It helps to have that pick if you want to get Aiyuk, because then you still have assets at disposal during this year's draft. But I think that even without the trade of Aiyuk, the same rules apply there. I mean, we were talking about it gets them more opportunities in those first 3 rounds that you said are really good this year. And you're right, because those first 3 rounds all have players that have, at the very least, potential to develop into good NFL players. So if you get more of those players, it's never a bad thing, especially if everything shakes out where they have so many options at 20 that trading back just makes sense to 28 and getting more of those second round picks, those third round picks. So yeah, I would say it still makes sense. And to answer your second one, if it gets past the NFL draft, does it make sense? Does the price stay the same for Brandon Aiyuk? I think the price goes down, and you and Steven said this yesterday. The price goes down the longer he doesn't have a contract, because San Francisco loves to play hardball. They do it with all their star players. This is nothing new for them. But what's new is the star player going into the media and saying, I don't know, I'd want to be traded if they're not going to give me what I want, and saying all those things and going on Instagram. I don't know how that plays in. It's just a different person negotiating in a different way. But I would say that the price remains the same. But I would say the likelihood of that trade gets higher and higher the closer you get to training camp without a deal.
Yes. The 49ers play hardball. They've played hardball with numerous guys in the past, and I expect them, like John Lynch is a great GM. So I'm not looking at this saying John Lynch isn't going to get a deal done. But I think it's so difficult to pay 2 wide receivers on top of everybody else that they're paying on that team. It's got to be nearly impossible to figure out how to give a second wide receiver $30 million a year. That just doesn't make sense. And I get it. People are saying, well, the Super Bowl window's open right now. I agree. That's why I think that August is probably your most likely situation when it comes to a trade here, because at that point, they're going to be looking at it and they're going to say, what are our options here? He's going to hold out for the season, which we know guys will hold out for the season. And that's what they're going to work with, is just a guy that they're going to lose in a year and he's not going to help them at all in 2024. Or are they going to look at it and say, well, let's get a second round pick and see how long we could carry this and keep this going and, kind of go from there. I think a lot of things come into play here, but I think that if San Francisco, feels it, they'll draft a wide receiver and you'll see them draft a wide receiver. And then everybody's going to go, whoa, what's happening now? And that's when it's going to start to become a real possibility. Mm-hmm. The draft is right now, it's too early. The 49ers are going to hunker down. The more moves that are made, the closer we get to Brandon Aiyuk not playing and the 49ers being comfortable with Brandon Aiyuk not playing, the more realistic this becomes. And compensation-wise, second-round pick in 2025 seems very good. I could see even a third-round pick in 2025 and maybe a third-round pick in 2026 if that's where we're going. But I'm not giving up on a Brandon Aiyuk trade. Not happening.